My name is David. I'm 42 years old. And for a long time, I believed that once you found your place in life, everything else would fall into line. I was wrong. Some cracks don't show up right away. They hide under the surface. And by the time you notice them, the whole structure is already starting to fall apart. After my divorce, I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't even looking for happiness. I was just looking for quiet. That's why I moved to Brooklyn. A small apartment. Neutral walls. Thin floors. Loud pipes. Nothing special. But it was mine. My ex-wife had taken more than the house and the savings. She took the version of me I thought I would always be. I used to think I knew who I was, a husband, a partner, someone building toward something. After the divorce, all of that disappeared. I became a man rebuilding from rubble. This apartment felt like neutral ground. A place where nobody knew my past. Where nobody expected anything from me. The woman who lived next door was named Sarah. She was polite. Quiet. Always tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Married to a man named Marcus, a corporate executive who was almost never home. They had a daughter, Emma. When I first moved in, Emma was 16. Quiet. Withdrawn. Always wearing headphones. She walked fast through the hallway, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes down. Sarah would smile when we passed each other. But it was the kind of smile that stopped before it reached her eyes. The first real conversation Sarah and I had happened on a rainy Tuesday. We were both checking the mail in the lobby when she dropped an envelope. I picked it up and handed it to her. She laughed, like the sound surprised her. "Thank you," she said. "I'm Sarah, by the way. We're neighbors, but I don't think we've really met." "David," I said, shaking her hand. "Moved in a couple months ago." "Welcome," she said. Then her smile faltered. "Fair warning. The pipes are loud. And the landlord never fixes anything." After that, we started running into each other more. Short conversations. Coffee before work. Comments about the weather. Nothing deep. One morning by the elevator, she was struggling with grocery bags. She sighed and said, almost to herself, "I traded passion for security when I married Marcus." She laughed right after, like she hadn't meant to say it out loud. Some days, she added quietly, "I wonder if it was worth it." Marcus was successful. Driven. Always traveling. He provided everything, except presents. Sarah once told me they used to talk about dreams. Traveling together. Building a life. Now their conversations were about bills, schedules, and Emma's future. The dreams had faded quietly. Years passed. Emma grew up. By the time I really noticed her again, she was 20. She came back from her first year of college different. More open. More confident. Less hidden. One morning, I ran into her at the coffee shop downstairs. A small place with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. She was reading something heavy. Academic. "Serious reading for a morning," I said while waiting for my order. She smiled. "It makes the rest of the day feel easier." We talked. Just casually. Books. City life. Loneliness. She listened, really listened. Not the polite nod people give while waiting to speak. She asked questions. Remembered things. It made me feel seen. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. One evening, Sarah was away visiting her sister. Emma knocked on my door holding a package. "This came to our place by mistake," she said. "Amazon again." I thanked her. We stood there talking for 20 minutes. About her internship. About her father always being gone. About her mother pretending everything was fine. Before she left, she paused and said softly, You seem like someone who understands what it's like to be alone." That sentence stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, we crossed paths more often. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into long conversations in the park. I told myself it was harmless. That I was just being kind. Maybe a mentor. But I was lying to myself. One afternoon, she asked, "Why did your marriage end?" I gave the usual answer. "We grew apart." She didn't speak. Just waited. So I told the truth. "We wanted different versions of each other," I said. She wanted more ambition. I wanted peace. Emma nodded. "That's my parents," she said. "They perform being a family." I should have changed the subject. I didn't. She told me about her father missing birthdays. About her mother's prescription bottles. About feeling invisible in her own home. I shared too much. About divorce. About failure. About starting over in middle age. And she listened. Then one night, everything shifted. I was on my balcony reading when I heard crying. Emma was on hers. Phone in hand. Tears streaming. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Not really." "My door's open," I said without thinking. 10 minutes later, she knocked. She sat on my couch. City lights flickering behind her. Voice shaking. "I can't take it anymore," she said. "Pretending we're a family. Pretending this is normal." She looked at me like I was the only person who understood. "You're the only one who sees me." My heart was pounding. Then she reached for my hand. Time slowed. I saw everything we could destroy. And for a moment, I wanted to let the loneliness win. But I stood up. "This isn't right," I said. Her face collapsed. She left. And the door closing sounded final. That night, I stared at the ceiling. Terrified, not of what happened, but of how close I came. The morning after Emma left my apartment, the building felt different. Same walls. Same hallway. Same flickering lobby light that the landlord still hadn't fixed. But something had shifted. It was like the air itself knew a line had almost been crossed. I woke up early, earlier than usual, and lay there staring at the ceiling. Every sound felt louder than it should have been: pipes knocking, footsteps in the hall, a door slamming somewhere below. I replayed the moment over and over. Her hand reaching for mine. The look in her eyes. The part of me that wanted to say yes. That was the part that scared me the most. Not that she reached out, but that I wanted to let her. When I finally left my apartment, I stepped into the hallway carefully, like I was walking into a crime scene. Emma's door was closed. I listened for movement. Nothing. At the elevator, I waited longer than usual, half hoping she wouldn't appear, half dreading that she might. She didn't. That became the pattern. Days passed. Then a week. Emma vanished from my daily life as if she'd never been part of it at all. She took the stairs instead of the elevator. Left early. Came home late. When I did catch a glimpse of her, it was always from a distance, crossing the street, unlocking her car, slipping into the building with her head down. She never looked toward my window. The coffee shop downstairs turned into forbidden territory. The first time I walked past it and saw her inside through the window, my chest tightened so hard I had to stop walking. She was laughing with someone from her internship. Hair pulled back. Alive. I kept walking. I stopped going there after that. Sarah, on the other hand, noticed nothing. She ran into me in the lobby a few days later, cheerful in the way people get when they're grateful for small talk. "Emma's been so stressed lately," she said. "Probably just adjusting to being home." "College changes people," I replied, forcing a smile. She nodded. "Marcus is in Seattle this week. Another merger." She laughed softly. You know how it is. I nodded again. Inside, I felt sick. Every time I saw Sarah, the guilt dug deeper. She trusted me. Trusted me enough to talk about her marriage. To mention her daughter. To treat me like a safe presence. And I had almost become something else. Something that would have shattered her world. The summer dragged on. The building felt heavier. Quieter. Some nights I heard Emma come home late, footsteps soft in the hall. Other nights, her door never opened at all. I wondered if she was staying with friends. Or sleeping at the office. Or just avoiding everything that reminded her of that night. Including me. Then, one evening in late July, there was a knock at my door. I froze. Through the peephole, I saw a man in a tailored jacket holding a bottle of scotch. Marcus. My heart started racing. Had Emma told him? Was this the confrontation I'd been dreading? I opened the door. David, he said, smiling. Got a minute? I stepped aside. He settled into my living room like he belonged there. The same couch. The same space where everything had almost gone wrong. He poured 2 glasses. I wanted to thank you, he said. The words hit me like a punch. Sarah says you've been a good friend. To her. To Emma. I couldn't meet his eyes. It's nothing, I said. Just being neighborly. No, he insisted. It's more than that. He took a sip of scotch and sighed. I'm not around much. I know that. And I worry Emma's pulling away from me. But Sarah says she talks about you. About your conversations. My stomach twisted. You've been more present in her life this summer than I have, he said. And I appreciate it. I wanted to tell him everything. That his daughter had cried in this room. That she had reached for comfort I almost gave her. That I was not the man he thought I was. But I stayed silent. You're her father, I said instead. She needs you. He laughed softly. Maybe. But I think I've already missed my chance. He stared into his glass. You ever build a successful life, he asked, and realize you forgot what it was all for? I looked at him. Really looked. This man had money. Status. Power. And he was just as lonely as the rest of us. Yes, I said quietly. I know exactly what you mean. He stayed another hour. Talking about work. About pressure. About how being needed feels different from being loved. When he left, I sat alone in the silence, shaken. A month later, the moving truck arrived. I heard it early in the morning, the sound of metal ramps and cardboard boxes. Emma was leaving. I watched from behind my curtain like a coward. Sarah stood on the sidewalk giving instructions. Marcus wasn't there. Emma moved quickly. Efficient. Detached. She didn't look up once. When the truck pulled away, it felt like something in my chest went with it. Sarah mentioned it casually days later. Emma moved to Boston, she said. Graduate school. She smiled. She seemed ready to get away. I nodded. She wasn't just getting away. She was escaping. Months passed. Fall arrived. Leaves turned gold. Air cooled. Sarah told me Emma was doing well. Thriving. She barely comes home, Sarah said once. Even for holidays. I accepted Emma's silence as punishment. Fair. Deserved. I changed my routines. New coffee shop. New walking routes. Erased every place we'd ever talked. Then one morning, a letter arrived. No return address. Just my name. My hand shook as I opened it. Her handwriting was careful. Measured. She wrote about loneliness. About gratitude. About forgiveness. You did the right thing, she wrote. I cried in my kitchen. Because she was right. And because doing the right thing had still cost us both. I read Emma's letter more times than I can count. At first, I read it slowly, like I was afraid the words might disappear if I rushed. Then again, faster, as if repetition would make it sink in. And then once more, standing there in my kitchen, morning light spilling across the counter, tears blurring the ink. Her handwriting was neat. Controlled. Like someone who had rewritten the same truth again and again until it stopped shaking. She didn't accuse me. She didn't blame me. That almost hurt more. I don't blame you, she wrote. I was lost. And you were kind. Those words sat heavy in my chest. Because kindness, when mixed with loneliness, can turn dangerous without warning. She wrote about Boston. About trying to understand herself. About realizing she'd been searching for validation in the wrong places. And then she wrote something that stopped me cold. You protected me from myself. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my desk drawer. Some nights, I'd take it out just to remind myself that the worst version of me hadn't won. Life went on. That's the cruelest thing about moments that almost destroy you, the world doesn't stop to acknowledge them. Work continued. People laughed in the streets. The seasons changed. Sarah and I still crossed paths. We'd have coffee every few weeks. Talk about books. About her painting, she'd started again, timidly, like someone returning to a language she'd once spoken fluently. Marcus was around less and less. Then one afternoon, Sarah said it quietly, like she was afraid the words might shatter. We're separating. She didn't cry. She just stared into her cup. I think we've been lonely together for a very long time, she said. I nodded. Some marriages don't explode. They just fade. After the divorce, Sarah moved downtown. Smaller place. More light. She looked different. Still lonely, but lighter. Marcus remarried within a year. Emma stayed away. Built her life on her own terms. 2 years passed. And then, one afternoon, in a bookstore in Manhattan, I heard my name. David. I turned. Emma stood there, older now. Stronger. Her hair shorter. Her posture different. She smiled. And in that moment, I understood something clearly for the first time. The danger had passed. We talked between the shelves. About her doctorate. About her research on loneliness and community. The irony didn't escape either of us. At the door, she stopped. I wanted to thank you, she said. For being strong when I couldn't be. I nodded. We hugged, brief, respectful, clean. And when she walked away, I felt something rare. Peace. Not relief. Peace. That night, back in my apartment, I sat alone. Same walls. Same pipes. Same city outside my window. But I wasn't the same man who'd moved in years ago. Loneliness hadn't won. And that mattered. After I ran into Emma at the bookstore, something settled inside me. Not happiness. Not relief. Something quieter. Acceptance. For a long time, I had carried that night like a hidden bruise. Invisible to everyone else, but tender every time I pressed on it. Seeing her again didn't erase what happened. It didn't rewrite the past. But it changed the way I carried it. I stopped thinking of that moment as a failure I barely escaped. And started seeing it as a choice I made, consciously, deliberately, even when it cost me something. That mattered. Life after that didn't suddenly become easier. I was still alone. Still in the same apartment. Still waking up to quiet mornings and coming home to silent evenings. But the loneliness felt different now. Less desperate. Less hungry. I started noticing how often loneliness pushes people toward things that don't actually heal them. Quick relationships. Bad decisions. Temporary warmth that leaves deeper cold behind. I'd done that before. My marriage had lasted longer than it should have because I was afraid of being alone. That fear had almost cost me everything again. I dated, carefully. Coffee dates. Dinner conversations that felt polite but distant. I was honest now in a way I hadn't been before. When someone asked why my marriage ended, I didn't say we grew apart. I said we stopped listening to each other. Some women nodded, like they understood too well. Others changed the subject. Those were the ones I didn't call back. Sarah and I stayed in touch. Not closely. Just enough. Every few months, we'd meet for coffee. She talked about her painting, how strange it felt to create again without worrying if someone approved. I forgot I was allowed to want things, she said once. I understood that. She asked about Emma sometimes. She sounds happy, Sarah said. Distant. But happy. I didn't add anything. Some truths aren't yours to tell. Marcus disappeared from my life completely. I heard bits and pieces through the building gossip. New wife. New apartment. Same job. Same patterns, probably. I didn't judge him. Loneliness wears different masks. Sometimes it looks like neglect. Sometimes like ambition. Sometimes like silence. The hardest nights were the quiet ones. The kind where the city seemed to pause. No sirens. No voices through the walls. Just me and my thoughts. Those nights, I'd think about the version of myself that almost crossed that line. The man who wanted comfort more than integrity. I realized something uncomfortable. He hadn't gone away. He was still there. We like to believe we become better people and leave our darker instincts behind. That's not how it works. They stay. You just learn to recognize them faster. I learned to notice the warning signs. That tightening in my chest. That urge to feel needed at any cost. Loneliness doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers. It tells you that you deserve something. That no one would get hurt. That this time is different. It lies. One evening, about a year after Emma moved to Boston, I ran into a younger version of myself. At least, it felt that way. A woman I was seeing casually invited me over late. She was upset. Drunk. Vulnerable. She said she didn't want to be alone. The old instinct stirred. Be the one she needs. Be the solution. I remembered Emma's letter. You protected me from myself. I told the woman we should talk another time. She was angry. Hurt. But the next morning, I felt calm. That was new. Choosing restraint used to feel like loss. Now it felt like self-respect. I began to understand something I wish I'd learned earlier in life. Being needed isn't the same as being loved. And being wanted in moments of weakness isn't the same as being chosen. That realization changed how I moved through the world. I stopped trying to fill empty spaces, mine or anyone else's, with people. I filled them with habits. Morning walks. Reading. Cooking meals that took time. I learned to sit with the quiet instead of running from it. Some nights, I still took Emma's letter out of the drawer. Not because I missed her, but because it reminded me of who I wanted to be when no one was watching. 2 years after the bookstore meeting, something unexpected happened. I met someone. Not dramatically. Not in a movie way. At a community lecture about urban isolation. The topic made me smile. Life has a strange sense of humor. Her name was Claire. She was my age. Divorced. Thoughtful. We talked after the lecture. Not flirting. Not performing. Just talking. We walked a few blocks together before realizing neither of us wanted the conversation to end. With Claire, there was no urgency. No hunger. No feeling that something needed to be fixed. We took it slow. painfully slow, by modern standards. And that was the point. I told her about my divorce early on. Not everything. Just enough. She told me about hers. We didn't bond over damage. We bonded over honesty. One night, months in, she asked me something simple. "Are you happy?" I thought about it. "I'm learning," I said. She smiled. "Me too." That was enough. I still live in the same apartment. Sometimes I think about moving. Then I remember that places don't hold pain, people do. And growth often happens where the damage occurred. Some nights, I sit on the balcony and watch the city lights. I think about all the moments that could have gone wrong. All the lines I could have crossed. And I realize something that took me decades to understand. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it's just a quiet decision made in a moment when no one would have blamed you for choosing differently. That night with Emma changed my life. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. Loneliness doesn't arrive all at once. It sneaks in quietly. It sits beside you on the couch when the TV is on but you're not really watching. It stands in the kitchen while you eat dinner alone, scrolling through your phone just to hear another human voice. It shows up late at night, when the city finally goes quiet and there's nowhere left to hide. After everything with Emma, I became hyper-aware of it. Not just my own loneliness, but everyone else's too. I started noticing it everywhere. In the barista who lingered too long in conversation. In co-workers who stayed late even when there was no work left. In couples who talked loudly at restaurants but never looked at each other. Loneliness wears disguises. Sometimes it looks like confidence. Sometimes like busyness. Sometimes like humor. But once you've almost let it ruin your life, you start to recognize its voice. It sounds reasonable. It says things like, "You've suffered enough. You deserve comfort. No one would blame you." That voice had almost convinced me once. I promised myself it wouldn't again. That didn't mean the temptation disappeared. It meant I had to face it honestly. There were nights I wanted to text Emma. Not because I wanted anything inappropriate, that chapter was closed. But because she understood a part of me no one else ever had. I never sent the messages. Understanding without boundaries is still dangerous. Claire and I continued seeing each other. Slowly. Carefully. She wasn't filling a hole in my life, she was walking beside me while I learned how to live with the emptiness without letting it define me. One evening, we were cooking dinner together. Nothing fancy. Pasta. Music playing softly. She asked, "What scares you the most now?" The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a long time. Becoming careless, I said finally. Confusing comfort with connection. She nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. That's when I knew she was different. Not because she fixed anything, but because she didn't try to. I started therapy around that time. Not because I was falling apart, but because I didn't want to again. The therapist asked me something during our third session. What would have happened if you had said yes that night? I closed my eyes. I saw it clearly. The secrecy. The guilt. Sarah's devastation. Emma's confusion turning into shame. Marcus's anger. And then the part no one talks about. The emptiness afterward. Loneliness promises relief. But it never stays. It takes what it wants and leaves you worse than before. I said that out loud. The therapist nodded. That's insight, she said. And insight is how people change. I didn't feel proud. I felt humbled. I had been one decision away from becoming someone I couldn't respect. That realization stayed with me. Months passed. Claire and I grew closer, not dramatically, but steadily. We disagreed sometimes. We talked it through. No silent punishments. No emotional manipulation. Just adults learning how not to disappear inside each other. One night, after she'd gone home, I sat alone and thought about Emma again. Not with longing. With gratitude. She had unknowingly given me a mirror. She showed me who I could become if I wasn't careful. And who I could be if I was. I wondered how many people never get that moment of clarity. How many cross the line and spend the rest of their lives justifying it. Loneliness doesn't just make us weak. It makes us creative liars. We rewrite our actions. We minimize the damage. We tell ourselves stories where we're still the good guy. I didn't want to live like that. A year later, Sarah called me. We hadn't spoken in months. She asked if I wanted to grab coffee. When we sat down, she looked healthier. Calmer. I've been thinking a lot, she said. About the past. About mistakes. I stayed quiet. I just wanted to say thank you, she continued. For being kind when I needed it. For never crossing lines. My heart skipped. She didn't know. Not really. But somehow she knew. I nodded. You deserve peace, I said. So do you, she replied. That was the last time we talked. Not because anything was wrong. But because some connections serve their purpose and then quietly step aside. Emma emailed me once more. A short message. She was working on a project about emotional boundaries and mentorship. I finally understand how rare it is, she wrote. For someone to say no when yes would have been easier. I stared at the screen for a long time. Loneliness had almost made me a villain in someone else's story. Instead, it forced me to grow. That doesn't make me heroic. It makes me human. I still have lonely days. I still feel the ache sometimes. But now, when loneliness starts talking back to me, when it whispers its lies, I recognize the voice. And I answer it with silence. No one really talks about this part. We talk about temptation. We talk about mistakes. We talk about redemption. But we rarely talk about the quiet cost of doing the right thing. Because doing the right thing doesn't come with applause. There's no moment where the world stops and says, "You chose well." Most of the time, the reward is invisible. You don't gain anything. You just don't lose yourself. As I moved deeper into my 40s, that truth settled into me slowly. My life didn't become exciting. It became honest. And honesty, I learned, is quieter than drama. Claire and I stayed together. Not because it was perfect. But because it was steady. We didn't rush milestones. No pressure to move in. No promises made out of fear. We let time do what it does best, reveal people. Sometimes, I wondered what my life would look like if I'd made a different choice that night. Not in a nostalgic way. In a cautionary one. I imagined myself carrying a secret that would rot from the inside. Smiling at Sarah while knowing I'd betrayed her. Watching Emma grow into adulthood with shame instead of gratitude. That future didn't disappear just because I chose differently. It stayed close enough to remind me what restraint had saved. Aging does something strange to loneliness. When you're young, loneliness feels like rejection. Like something is wrong with you. When you're older, it feels more like space. Unfilled rooms. The question becomes what you do with that space. I filled it with intention. Long walks without headphones. Journals no one would ever read. Conversations where I listened more than I spoke. One night, Claire asked me something unexpected. Do you ever regret not having children? I thought of Emma. Not as a daughter. But as a turning point. Sometimes, I said. But I also know I was never ready to be the kind of father a child deserves. She nodded. Being ready matters more than wanting, she said. That sentence stayed with me. Readiness. That's what I'd lacked for most of my life. Readiness to face discomfort. Readiness to sit with loneliness without trying to escape it. Readiness to say no when yes felt good. Marcus crossed my mind occasionally. I wondered if he ever realized what he'd lost. Not just Emma, but the version of himself who might have shown up sooner. I didn't feel anger toward him. Just sadness. Because neglect doesn't come from cruelty. It comes from distraction. And distraction destroys quietly. Sarah sent me a photo once. One of her paintings. Bright colors. Movement. I finally feel like myself again, she wrote. I smiled. She had survived her own loneliness too. Emma never came back to live in Brooklyn. She built her life somewhere else. That felt right. Some places are meant to be chapters, not homes. On my 50th birthday, I sat alone on the balcony. Not because I had no one, but because I wanted to. The city stretched out in front of me, full of people making choices they'd never talk about. I raised a glass to no one in particular. To restraint. To lessons learned late. To the lines that protect us even when they hurt. The greatest love story of my life wasn't romantic. It was the relationship I built with my own conscience. And for the first time, we were at peace. There's a version of your life that exists only in your head. Not the dream version. The other one. The life that would have happened if you'd made one different choice. Most people never let themselves look at it. I do. Not because I enjoy it, but because it keeps me honest. As the years passed, I realized something unsettling. The most important moments of our lives rarely feel important when they happen. They don't arrive with music. They don't announce themselves. They look like ordinary evenings. Closed doors. Unsent messages. That night with Emma didn't feel dramatic in the moment. It felt confusing. Tempting. Human. Only later did I understand how much weight it carried. I began to notice how often people around me were standing at similar edges. Friends who talked about harmless flirtations. Co-workers who justified emotional affairs. Strangers who crossed lines because no one stopped them. They all sounded the same. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was lonely. Loneliness has become our favorite excuse. But loneliness doesn't remove responsibility. It just tests it. Claire and I eventually moved in together. Not because we needed to, but because we wanted to. There was no fear in the decision. That was how I knew it was right. One night, she asked me if I believed people could truly change. I thought about it carefully. I think people can learn, I said. Change is quieter than we expect. She smiled. That's a very David answer. I took that as a compliment. Emma published her first major paper a few years later. Urban isolation. Emotional displacement. The cost of blurred boundaries. I read it cover to cover. Not as someone involved in her past, but as someone who recognized the truth in her work. She wrote about how people mistake attention for care. How mentorship can turn harmful when emotional needs are confused. How the most ethical choice often feels like rejection in the moment. I felt proud. Not of myself. Of her. She had taken pain and turned it into clarity. That's rare. One afternoon, she sent me a message. Short. Simple. I hope you're well. I replied the same way. No nostalgia. No reopening doors. Just respect. That's what healing looks like. I realized then that maturity isn't about forgetting the past. It's about knowing where it belongs. The older I got, the more I understood that morality isn't about perfection. It's about pause. That brief moment where you stop and ask, who will I become if I do this? Not will I get caught. Not do I deserve this. But can I live with the person this turns me into? That question has guided me ever since. I stopped chasing intensity. I stopped confusing desire with destiny. I chose steadiness. Not because it's exciting, but because it's sustainable. Some nights, I still feel the echo of that old loneliness. It doesn't scare me anymore. It reminds me that I'm human, that I'm capable of mistakes, and that choosing not to make them is a decision I have to renew every day. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. We are not defined by our darkest urges. We're defined by the moments we resist them. And those moments rarely get witnessed by anyone else. They're private, quiet, and powerful. There's a strange myth we grow up believing. That love is about taking. That happiness is about grabbing hold of what feels good in the moment. That if something offers warmth, we should reach for it without asking where the heat comes from. But life teaches a harder truth. Some warmth burns everything it touches. Some doors are open not because you're meant to walk through them, but because you're meant to prove you won't. I think about that now, years later, sitting in the same apartment where my life nearly split in two. Same balcony. Same view of the city. Different man. The older I get, the more I understand that character isn't built during big heroic moments. It's built in private. When no one would ever know what you did. When silence would protect you. When the easiest choice would hurt people quietly instead of loudly. That night with Emma could have stayed a secret forever. No one would have walked in. No camera. No witnesses. But I would have known. And some things, once you know them about yourself, never leave you. I didn't stop because I was stronger than other men. I stopped because I saw the cost clearly enough to be afraid of myself. I saw how loneliness can turn care into hunger. How kindness can blur into entitlement. How easily we convince ourselves that pain gives us permission. It doesn't. Loneliness doesn't make us special. It makes us vulnerable. And vulnerability without boundaries destroys trust faster than cruelty ever could. Emma wasn't a temptation. She was a mirror. She reflected back a version of me that wanted to be needed more than I wanted to be good. Walking away didn't make me noble. It made me responsible. That distinction matters. Because responsibility is heavier than desire. It doesn't feel good in the moment. It doesn't reward you with passion or excitement. It rewards you with something quieter. The ability to sleep at night. The ability to look people in the eye. The ability to live without rewriting your past to survive your present. I don't tell this story because I'm proud. I tell it because I almost failed. And because many people listening to this right now are standing at their own edge. Different situation. Same choice. A message you haven't replied to yet. A conversation that's drifting somewhere dangerous. A feeling you're calling connection when it's really just two lonely people reaching out in the dark. You're telling yourself it's harmless. That you deserve this. That no one will get hurt. But you already know that's not true. You wouldn't be listening to this if you didn't. Some boundaries exist not because we don't want to cross them, but because crossing them would destroy the very thing we're searching for. Real connection. Trust. Human warmth without shame attached to it. I didn't get a reward for saying no. I lost a friendship. I carried guilt. I sat with loneliness longer than I wanted to. But I kept my integrity. And integrity has a strange way of paying you back slowly. In peace. In clarity. In relationships that don't require you to disappear. I still feel lonely sometimes. That never fully goes away. But now, when loneliness speaks, I listen, and then I let it pass. I don't let it decide for me. Because I've learned something this life taught me the hard way. The greatest act of love isn't taking what you want. It's having the discipline to walk away when taking it would cost too much. That's the man I became. Not because I was perfect. But because, when it mattered most, I chose to be better.